Hello and welcome to Painting the Subject Matter. Quick demonstration. I just want to go over like clean edges, but also how can you create form. So I have all of my background done, more than 10 layers. I painted my sides, I painted the bottom, I painted the top, the other side, okay, with my technique. While I was doing that, even though this is going to be brown in the end, brownish, I still added some similar colors, so I have repetition of color. So you just want to make sure you don't have just one color in one area. For visual balance, you want to repeat colors. Okay, so then I'll go over form in just a minute, but I slightly did overlap the contour outline of my leaf. And so I'm going to use a tiny brush to get a clean edge at first, even though the tiny brush is not what I would use for the actual technique. Hold on, I'm mixing up a green real fast. To blue. All right, so I would use my blue tiny brush, and then I actually, whenever I'm painting with the tiny brush, I still always put like a little blob of paint. And I'm gonna kind of wipe that off, dry it off. Okay. So that way I can swirl my bristles in it, like just the bristles, twirl my brush to get some of that paint off of it so I can get a super clean edge. Because this is where I'm gonna come back in and get all those little jaggedy areas. Now I'm going to get it pretty thick on the edge, especially if you have tiny little detail like this. And then I'll pull it down a little bit. And here I kind of lost some detail, so I'm just going to paint on top of what's there anyway. So I just don't want white canvas showing through, like where one area starts and the other one stops. Oh, that's hard for you guys to see. I apologize. It's very, very light green. There's a bigger version of that. And I'll pull it down. So I would do the edges with a tiny brush. Then to save time, this is my small brush. I will come back and kind of fill in with the small brush. So you want to get clean edges, and if it's a small area with a lot of detail, use your tiny brush. All right, so then if I wanted to, so I do that, then I would do my technique, and I would add my 10 different layers of greens and blues, and I'd probably use, like, I have this blue mixed up, so I'd use a little bit of that blue to repeat in some of the veins, etc. Okay. So I wanted it to look like light was coming from this side. So I did add like a little bit more light value over here in my background. But really that's going to happen when I paint the petals. And in the center, I started adding some, when I was doing the background, I picked up some lighter color and started adding it along this side. So the easiest way to create form is through light. And so I would pick one location where you want the light to come from. And you guys definitely have had practice with that. With your 3-point perspective. Hold on, let me grab my original color of these petals. All right, so the light, I'm going to paint like a couple of petals for you. I'm going to take a blob out of my original color. So I'll put it, maybe a couple. And so if I have that color, I'm gonna, or whatever color I make, I'm just gonna put it everywhere. All right, I'm gonna go with a lighter kind of orange. So I'm gonna take my yellow red, or sorry, orangish red, mix it in with my original yellow. And I'm still kind of flattening my brush a little bit so I can actually get more brush strokes. So the last step I did after I finished the background, because I still had some of these colors like on my newspaper, last night, I went ahead and started putting in where I want my darkest values to be. So I put in, like, if my light's going to come from the right hand side, then I put like little marks more on the left. I also took some of that purple, even though it's going to be dark yellow. I still would have like little bits of the purple showing through. So in the leaves that are underneath the top layer, I have those kind of showing through. All right. The very last thing I'm going to paint is the center, because I have this like intricate little edge, and I'm going to put pointillism on top of this as well. And so that way I can kind of dot along the edge to kind of clean it up, because I'm going to flip this upside down so it's a little bit easier to do. Because I'm going to go from the center and kind of pull out. I'm just going to add a little bit in the next one. So I'm not so concerned with edges just yet, and I'm trying to kind of stay away from getting it in the background. And in my last layer, like here where I got background color overlapping that petal, I'm going to put in my highlights anyway, and I'm going to clean up edges. So I'll just do like a couple, like with my brush stroke. Okay, then obviously I would keep that puddle, and let's say I want a different kind of yellow, so I just took yellow out of my, just straight up yellow out of my palette. Let me get a little bit more yellow. It still looks fairly orange. Okay, super yellowy orange. All right, and I'm going to go back and kind of touch, because I want to kind of use similar brush strokes, but not exactly the same. So I'm going to build up my layers of color, my 10. And I'm also, okay, so I'm doing a couple marks with my brush, and then I'm going to flip it over and use the paint on the other side, or turn it so you can use the paint on the corner. That way you don't have to dip your brush in paint as much, and you can paint a little bit faster. Since many of you are probably in a time crunch, I would assume, at this point. All right, so then I would use that same puddle and mix up another color, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so let me come back in, and I'm going to show you how to refine and do like your last bit of layers of highlights later on. But I want to show you kind of what I'm thinking about for the next stages. So if my light's coming from the, well, upside down, but this is going to be the right-hand side, I'm going to kind of come back, and I'll put highlights kind of all over. So I'm going to start building up my highlights. So now I'm taking it back more towards the original color. Then I'm going to do whatever paint was on my brush with white to make an even lighter tint of that color. And so this is why I'm waiting to paint the center, because I want to get a better, cleaner edge where the center is. So this isn't straight up white. Now I'm getting a little bit closer to the edge, being a little more aware of that. So let me get another. I'm going to finish off this petal. Okay, then I can always take back some of my original color. And then, oh, you guys can't really see. Can't really see all those layers very well. Maybe I would come back in with some of that pink that I used originally to paint the base of that. So I would definitely, this is the color that I mixed up, I would definitely repeat colors. Okay, so for form, you want like shadow and highlight. All right, let me take a little bit of my reddish orange, mix it in with my pink for a different, darker version. All right, then I'm building up to my actual highlights where I would use, well, that could be my highlight, but I do want like a lot of contrast in the petals because they're going to be the lightest value part. So I'm going to use just white. And in my last layer, I would let this dry actually, but I would kind of put in my highlight on that side. And so I do that for every petal, but make sure that you're not just like painting one petal at a time. I would like layer, 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 layer all the way around. I'm actually going to build up my layers of these darker petals first because the lighter ones kind of overlap and go on top. So think of what's laying on top and make sure that gets painted later. So the center kind of is going to overlap on top of the petals, so I'm going to paint that last. My leaves are overlapping the background, so obviously I'm painting those last, etc. All right, have fun, and I'll see you in the next video where I talk about refining. So I'll have it like almost done, and we'll like put some highlights on there and clean up some edges, and then you'll be finished with your painting.